It started as just another quiet summer in the neighborhood. The sun was out, the grass was green, and everything felt calm. My house sat on a peaceful cul-de-sac, the kind where neighbors wave at each other but mostly keep to themselves. It wasn't fancy, but I loved it. Especially the pool. It wasn't Olympic-sized or anything, just a modest backyard pool. But it was mine. I worked hard for it, kept it clean, and used it to relax after long days. For me, the pool was a personal space. I didn't throw parties or invite half the block over. I liked things quiet. Peaceful. That's how I liked my life, simple, with no drama. But unfortunately, drama seems to have a way of finding you, especially when there's a Karen living nearby. Now, I didn't even know her name at first. She moved into the neighborhood a few months after I did. She introduced herself as the acting HOA head, like it was a title she'd won in battle. Her name could have been Susan or Lisa, but it didn't matter. Everyone just started calling her Karen, and not in a friendly way. You know the type. Always watching. Always ready with a complaint. Grass too long. She'll email the HOA. Car parked facing the wrong direction. She'll take a picture. Forgot to bring your trash bin in by 6 p.m.? She'll knock on your door with a printed copy of the community rules. At first, I ignored it. I figured she just needed something to do. Maybe she was bored. Maybe her kids had moved out and she missed being in charge of something. I don't know. But soon, it became clear she wasn't just bored, she wanted control. She'd make little comments when she saw me outside. You know the HOA recommends beige pool furniture, not blue, she'd say, staring at my perfectly clean patio chairs. Or, I noticed your pool umbrella leans a little. You might want to correct that. I smiled. I nodded. I said, thanks, I'll look into it. But deep down, I was boiling. I don't mind rules, but I do mind people who think they can tell you how to live in your own home. Still, I let it go. I figured if I didn't feed the fire, it would go out on its own. But one weekend changed everything. It was a Saturday morning, and I had plans to visit family out of town. I packed up early and left around 9 a.m. It was supposed to be a short trip, just one night. I thought nothing of it. But while I was gone, someone decided my backyard pool was open for business. I came back Sunday afternoon. The first thing I noticed was the gate to my backyard was wide open. That was weird. I always keep it locked. Then I saw the chairs, moved around like someone had been lounging in them. Towels on the ground. Empty soda cans. Chip bags. Pool toys that weren't mine floating in the water. At first, I thought maybe kids had broken in. But then I checked my outdoor security camera. And that's when I saw it. Karen. In broad daylight. Walking right into my backyard like she owned the place. She had on sunglasses, a giant sun hat, and a towel over one shoulder like she was checking into a beach resort. Behind her were about 10 people, adults, kids, coolers, you name it. They were laughing, jumping into my pool, splashing around like it was a public water park. No note. No call. No permission. She didn't even try to hide it. Like using someone's private pool without asking was completely normal behavior. I sat there, staring at the footage, trying to make sense of it. Was this real? Who does that? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? Because this wasn't just disrespectful. It wasn't just annoying. It was a full-blown violation. Of privacy. Of boundaries. Of everything that made me feel safe in my own home. And as I looked at my pool, still showing signs of Karen's uninvited bash, I decided something. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't even going to call the HOA. No. I was going to teach Karen a lesson she wouldn't forget. And that's when I came up with the perfect idea. Karen wasn't just some nosy neighbor who peeked through the blinds. She took her self-appointed role in the HOA like it was a full-time job. She wasn't elected. She wasn't even on the board officially. But she made herself the acting head after the last guy moved away, and somehow no one bothered to argue. I think most people just didn't want the hassle. But not caring gave her power, and she used every inch of it. She had this way of talking that made you feel like you were back in school and she was the principal. Even though she had no real authority, her voice carried this smug tone, like she was doing you a favor by pointing out every tiny thing she didn't like. Her favorite phrase. As per the HOA guidelines. Like she had the entire rulebook memorized. The truth is, Karen didn't care about rules. She cared about control. She wanted things her way, and if you didn't play along, she'd find a reason to make you wish you had. I watched her harass neighbors over weeds in their yards, over lawn decorations, over what time people brought their garbage bins in. One family painted their front door a soft blue, and she threatened to fine them, again, with no real authority. They changed the color back within a week. Most of us avoided her. It was easier that way. We waved, smiled, and walked faster whenever she was headed our direction. I think she liked that. She liked the power. But what she did to me was different. It wasn't just Karen being a busybody. It wasn't her calling the HOA on me for leaving my recycling bin out overnight. This time, she crossed a line that no decent person should ever cross. And the worst part? She didn't even try to hide it. When I re-watched the footage from my security camera, I noticed something else. Not just Karen walking in with her little group of guests. She actually brought a speaker. Like a whole Bluetooth setup. She played music, they danced, and someone even grilled burgers near my fence. My property. What gave her the confidence to do this? I couldn't understand it. My gate had a lock. It wasn't broken. So she either picked it, hopped it, or she had a copy of the key. That last thought chilled me more than anything. Had she made a copy without asking? I had let her water my plants once when I was away for a weekend last year. I gave her a spare key for that. I'd gotten it back, but had she made another one? I didn't want to believe someone could be that bold. That entitled. But I wasn't ruling anything out anymore. When I ran into her later that week, I didn't mention the pool. I wanted to see if she'd bring it up herself. She didn't. Not a word. She acted like everything was normal. She even gave me a little wave and said, "Hope your weekend trip was nice." With that fake smile on her face. I just smiled back. Because by then, I already had a plan. It wasn't enough to confront her. I could have marched over, yelled at her, demanded an apology, but that wasn't going to work with someone like Karen. People like her don't admit they're wrong. They don't say sorry. They don't feel guilty. They feel clever. No, if I wanted to make a point, I needed to speak her language. Something loud. Something visual. Something that would embarrass her without even saying a word. I started researching online. There were all kinds of stories, people pranking pool crashers, adding food dye to hot tubs, even throwing glitter into filters. But most of those were either too harsh or would damage my property. I didn't want to destroy my pool. I just wanted to send a message. That's when I came across something interesting. There are special types of pool-safe dyes. Used in water parks and science demos. Non-toxic. Completely harmless. But very bright. You add them to water, and within seconds, the whole pool changes color. One of the dyes was neon green. The idea hit me like a thunderbolt. If she wanted to use my pool without asking, fine. Let her. But next time she dips a toe in, she'll be doing it in a glowing green swamp that looks like something from a science fiction movie. I ordered the dye that same night. Overnight shipping. I was too excited to wait. The package arrived the next day, right on schedule. It looked so innocent. Just a small, sealed container with a bright label and a few instructions. Safe for swimmers. Non-toxic. For decorative use only. I stood there holding it like I was holding the key to some secret weapon. It wasn't destructive. It wouldn't hurt anyone. But it was going to make a statement. One that glowed. I waited for the perfect moment. I knew Karen wouldn't stop at just one party. That first one. That was her test. To see if she could get away with it. And since I didn't immediately confront her, I could tell she thought she had one. She probably assumed I was too soft to say anything, too timid to push back. She was wrong. Sure enough, 2 weekends later, the sign started showing again. It was subtle at first. Her grandkids playing in her front yard in swimsuits. A couple of folding chairs stacked neatly in her driveway. Then came the cooler. Then the towels. By Saturday morning, she was ready. I watched from inside as Karen and her little crew made their way toward my backyard, again, like it belonged to them. It was almost funny how comfortable she was with it. She didn't even look around to check if anyone was watching. That was my cue. I waited until they were all in the pool, laughing, splashing, playing with pool noodles. Then I quietly walked out the back door, keeping low behind the fence line. I reached the edge of the pool where the pump was and carefully opened the dye container. The instructions said just a few ounces were enough to transform a small backyard pool. I poured it straight into the return jet. Within seconds, I saw it. Tiny streams of color swirling out like magic. The dye spread fast, mixing with the water as if it had a mind of its own. Within 5 minutes, the entire pool was glowing this insane, radioactive-looking neon green. It was bright. Like alien slime. Like something out of a comic book. And then the screams started. Not fear, just shock. Confusion. Karen stood up in the shallow end, staring at her arms like she'd turned into the Hulk. One of the kids yelled, "What's happening to the water?" Another shouted, "It's glowing." I watched from a distance, pretending to be surprised. I stepped out with a completely calm face and said, "Oh no. Is something wrong with the pool?" Karen spun around like a wet cat, her sun hat dripping and twisted. "What asterisk is asterisk this? Why is your water green?" she shouted, her voice already rising to that shrill tone everyone in the neighborhood recognized. I kept my face blank. "No idea," I said. "Must be some kind of algae bloom. Maybe the chlorine levels were off. Could be anything." She didn't buy it, of course. But she also didn't know what to say. What could she say? Admit she had trespassed? Confess she brought a whole group over to a pool she didn't own? She stood there in her soaked sundress, flustered and speechless. Everyone started climbing out, dripping neon green water onto my patio, looking around like they were part of some weird prank show. Karen tried to salvage the moment. "You should really get that checked out," she said with this fake concern, like I was the one doing something wrong. "I will," I replied, nodding. "Thanks for letting me know." She left with her group in tow, wrapped in towels and embarrassment. The dye didn't stain anything. By evening, it had mostly faded, and after a round of filtration, the water was back to normal. No harm done, at least not to the pool. But to Karen. Oh, it did something. The best part. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't even accuse. I just let the water do the talking. And it said everything I needed it to say. The rest of the neighborhood heard about it by Sunday. I didn't tell them. Word just spread. Like wildfire. Apparently, some people even started calling my pool the Slime Lagoon. I didn't mind. Because suddenly, Karen wasn't walking around with that same smug attitude anymore. The following week felt different. Quieter. Karen wasn't doing her usual patrol. No early morning walks with a clipboard. No gentle reminders stuck to mailboxes. No fake smile greetings. She stayed inside most of the time. Curtains drawn. Garage door shut. It was like the queen of the HOA had suddenly gone underground. Neighbors started noticing. One even asked if Karen had gone on vacation. I just smiled and said, maybe she's laying low. The look I got in return told me they knew exactly what I meant. Because let's be honest, nobody was sad to see her take a break. In fact, it was kind of peaceful without her. Still, I wasn't sure if she'd stay quiet forever. People like Karen don't usually disappear that easily. They sulk, they plot, they wait for the right moment to strike back. So I stayed alert. Kept my cameras on. Made sure the gate was locked every night. Then, about a week after the incident, I got a letter in the mail. No stamp. No envelope. Just a folded piece of paper, slipped into my mailbox by hand. It was from the HOA. Well, sort of. The paper had the HOA logo printed at the top, but the formatting looked off. And the language. All over the place. It read like someone tried to sound official but didn't really know how to write like a professional. The letter claimed I had willfully modified the visual condition of a community-facing area in a way that could disturb the harmony of the neighborhood aesthetic. I actually laughed out loud. Karen had written this. I had no doubt. She probably typed it in Word, printed it out at home, and stuck it in my mailbox like some kind of citation. I imagined her hunched over her laptop, red-faced, typing furiously while her dog barked in the background. The best part. At the bottom, she signed it as acting HOA enforcer. Not president. Not board member. Not even volunteer. Just enforcer. Like she thought she was in a movie. I didn't respond. I didn't even acknowledge it. I just placed the letter in a drawer and let it sit there. But that didn't stop things from getting even weirder. 2 days later, someone knocked on my door around noon. I opened it to find one of the actual HOA board members, David, a quiet guy in his 60s who normally kept to himself. He held a clipboard, looked a little uncomfortable, and said, "Hey, mind if I ask you something about your pool?" Here we go, I thought. I invited him in. He looked around, glanced out back, and finally said, "Karen's been telling people your pool's leaking dye into the groundwater." I raised an eyebrow. Seriously? He nodded. Yeah. She says it could be dangerous. Wanted the board to look into it. But honestly, it sounds like a personal issue. I explained the whole story, minus the part where I planned it. I just told him I used a decorative, non-toxic dye that's safe and meant for temporary color changes. David listened, nodded along, and didn't seem bothered at all. He even chuckled a little when I described the color. Neon green, huh? That's kind of brilliant, he said. Apparently, the board was tired of Karen, too. She had filed multiple complaints over the past few months, most of them petty, all of them targeting different neighbors. David admitted the board was reviewing her role in anything HOA related. In other words, she was on thin ice. That was good enough for me. Meanwhile, Karen must have realized her grip on the neighborhood was slipping. She wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. Her letter didn't scare me. Her rumors didn't convince the board. And most importantly, nobody else in the neighborhood was backing her up anymore. The dye prank hadn't just embarrassed her. It exposed her. It showed everyone that the self-proclaimed enforcer of the HOA wasn't untouchable. That even Karen had limits. I didn't have to confront her in public or argue over property rights. I didn't have to yell or threaten legal action. I let her walk into her own trap, and then I let the truth spread on its own. And ever since that day, my pool has stayed blue and completely undisturbed. Summer slowly drifted into fall, and just like the changing weather, things in the neighborhood felt noticeably different. The air seemed lighter, more relaxed. You'd be surprised how much peace can return to a street when one person finally stops trying to run it like a private kingdom. Neighbors who used to avoid eye contact at the mailbox were now stopping to chat. People were actually planting flowers in colors other than beige. One family put up a lawn gnome, and nobody said a word. Not even a note. And my favorite part. No one was scared to laugh anymore. Karen's grip had loosened, and you could feel it. But Karen. She didn't vanish completely. No, she still lived 2 houses down, curtains drawn most of the time. She would step outside every now and then, always at odd hours, just long enough to fetch her mail or water a potted plant. She moved differently now. No more clipboards. No more bossy tone. Just quiet steps and quick glances, like she was worried someone might say something. Nobody needed to. She knew. The funny thing is, I never expected some harmless pool dye to change the whole tone of the neighborhood. I just wanted to teach her a lesson. But the dye did more than make the water glow. It broke the illusion she'd been clinging to for months. The illusion that she could do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, and no one would stop her. And now, people were starting to live a little again. A week after the green pool incident, my next-door neighbors invited me to their backyard barbecue. That never happened before. A few days later, someone down the block hosted a driveway movie night. Folding chairs, popcorn, projector screen, all out in the open. No one cared what the rules said. I even had parents ask if their kids could use my pool, With permission this time. That's all I ever wanted. Respect. A simple ask. And because they asked, I said yes. We ended up having a small, casual pool day. Nothing fancy. Just kids splashing, parents chatting, snacks on the table. And for once, I wasn't worried someone was going to sneak through the gate like they owned the place. I could see Karen peeking from her window during the whole thing. But here's where it got really interesting. About 3 weeks after the dye incident, I received another note. But this one wasn't anonymous. It was handwritten, neatly folded, and slid under my door. It was from Karen. The letter wasn't long. Just a few lines. She didn't exactly apologize. Karen didn't seem like the type who could easily say the word sorry. But she did say this. I recognize that I may have overstepped. I'll be more mindful in the future. Thank you for your understanding. That was it. Short. Clipped. But I'll admit, it caught me off guard. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part thought about writing something back. But in the end, I didn't respond. I figured the letter wasn't really for me. It was for her. Maybe it was her version of trying to move on. Maybe she realized she wasn't going to win this one. And maybe that was enough. I left the letter in a drawer, right next to the fake HOA warning she sent me weeks earlier. It's kind of funny seeing them side by side. 2 pieces of paper that represent 2 very different sides of the same person. Life moved on. The pool stayed clean. No unexpected guests. No more acting HOA enforcer nonsense. And Karen. Well, she hasn't thrown another party in my yard since. At least, not one that glowed. What stuck with me most wasn't just the prank or the reaction. It was how quickly things turned when someone finally pushed back. Not with violence. Not with anger. Just a clever move at the right time. And as simple as it was, that neon green water might have been the boldest thing I've ever done. Weeks turned into months, and just when I thought the whole thing had finally settled into a strange kind of neighborhood legend, something unexpected happened. It was late afternoon, one of those golden hour days where the sun hangs low and everything looks calm. I was out back, skimming leaves from the pool, enjoying how peaceful it had all become. That's when I noticed someone standing by the side fence. It was Karen. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, arms folded, looking not at me, but at the water. The same pool she once marched into without hesitation, like she owned the place. Now she was staring at it from a distance, like it was unfamiliar territory. She wasn't wearing one of her usual sun hats or that big plastic necklace she always had on. Just regular clothes. A little wrinkled, a little plain. It was strange seeing her without all the drama. Eventually, she spoke. I saw you had the pool resurfaced. I nodded. Yeah. Decided to freshen it up. Figured it was time. She kept her eyes on the water. Looks nice. I wasn't sure where this was going. She hadn't exactly spoken to me since the letter she left, and now here she was, trying to talk like nothing had happened. I didn't respond right away. I just kept skimming. After a few seconds, she added, I didn't mean for things to get that far. That far. That was her way of saying asterisk. She knew asterisk she crossed the line. I still didn't say anything. Not because I was angry anymore, but because I wanted to hear what she'd say without me filling in the blanks for her. She took a deep breath and continued. It's just, for a while, I felt like the whole neighborhood was slipping. People leaving things messy, ignoring the rules. I thought if no one else was going to do something, I should. There it was, her motive. Not necessarily evil. Just completely misguided. She didn't want chaos. She wanted control. And when she felt like she was losing it, she panicked. But instead of organizing or helping, she turned to policing. Sneaking. Controlling. And trespassing. I guess I let it go too far, she said, this time looking directly at me. I finally looked up. You didn't just go too far. You jumped the fence. She let out a short laugh, not a happy one, more like someone realizing the absurdity of their own actions after the fact. Yeah, I did. She glanced down at the ground, fidgeting with her fingers. I just wanted things to be nice. I sighed and set the skimmer aside. Karen, We all want things to be nice. But no one gets to decide that for everyone else. You can't run the neighborhood like it's your personal fiefdom. You can't bend the rules for yourself and then use them against everyone else. That's not keeping things nice. That's just picking favorites. She didn't argue. She just stood there, silent. For the first time, she looked like someone who wasn't trying to win. No clever comeback. No moral high ground. Just quiet. I waited a few seconds, then added, the pool dye didn't damage anything. I made sure of that. She looked up. I figured. After I stopped glowing. That made me laugh. A real one this time. She half smiled. The kids thought it was kind of cool. For like, a minute. Well, I said, maybe next time, you can ask before throwing a pool party in someone else's yard. Karen nodded. Yeah, I will. That was the end of it. No grand apology. No dramatic moment. Just a weird, awkward, honest conversation between two neighbors who had somehow survived the pettiest, most passive-aggressive war over pool water in suburban history. She turned and walked away, and I went back to skimming. From that day on, things stayed quiet. Karen didn't try to play enforcer anymore. She didn't try to take charge of the HOA, or hand out made-up rules. She didn't suddenly become friendly, but she became something better. *normal. Just another neighbor. Every now and then, she'd wave from her driveway, and I'd wave back. And while we never spoke about it again, I knew the glow of that neon green water still lived in her memory, just as brightly as it had in the pool. A few months later, the annual neighborhood meeting rolled around. Normally, I skipped those. They were long, boring, and always dominated by people who liked to hear themselves talk. But this time, I felt like showing up. Not for revenge, not to stir the pot, just to observe. After everything that happened, I was curious to see how things were running. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, the one near the front gate with the uncomfortable plastic chairs and the one flickering ceiling light. People trickled in slowly, holding water bottles, coffee mugs, and that same glazed-over look like they'd rather be anywhere else. I took a seat in the back, unnoticed at first. Then I saw her. Karen. She was already there, sitting 2 rows up, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wasn't at the front this time. She wasn't standing, speaking, or passing around sign-up sheets. She was just another person in the crowd. No clipboard. No printed agenda. Just sitting. It was strange to see her like that. And even stranger. No one was avoiding her. A couple of people even nodded politely as they walked past. She nodded back. It was like the entire neighborhood had silently agreed to give her a second chance, on probation, maybe, but still a chance. David, the same board member who came to my house months ago, stood up to start the meeting. He ran through the usual updates, budget stuff, community landscaping plans, some complaints about parking. Nothing too exciting. Then came the section titled Open Forum. That's when anyone could speak up about whatever they wanted. In the past, this was Karen's time to shine. She'd stand, clear her throat dramatically, and launch into a list of things she thought needed fixing, from lawn heights to garbage can colors. But this time, she didn't move. She just looked down at her folded hands. I was almost disappointed. Then someone else raised their hand. A younger guy, new to the neighborhood, stood up and said, "I just want to say, I think things have felt a lot more relaxed around here lately. Less tense." People nodded. A few murmured in agreement. Someone even said, "Yeah, it feels more like a community now." Karen didn't flinch. Then a woman near the front added, "Honestly, I think that pool incident really reminded everyone that we need to respect each other's space." That got a few quiet laughs. Nothing mean-spirited. Just the kind of chuckle you get when everyone knows a little neighborhood gossip and no one wants to say it out loud. Karen looked straight ahead. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say anything. The room was saying it for me. After the meeting wrapped up, people started filing out. I lingered for a bit, talking to a couple of neighbors I hadn't really gotten to know before. We chatted about weather, driveway cracks, and the mystery raccoon that had been tipping over trash cans on Maple Drive. Normal things. As I made my way toward the door, I passed Karen. She glanced at me, then said softly, "You staying for cookies?" I looked over at the folding table, where someone had laid out a tray of store-bought cookies and juice boxes. Not fancy, but something. "Maybe one," I said. She picked up a sugar cookie, turned it over in her hand, then smiled just a little. "I'm off the board, by the way. Officially." I nodded. "Probably for the best." "I think so too," she said. "I thought being in charge would help people listen to me. Turns out, listening works better when you're not yelling." That was probably the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard her say. We stood there for a few seconds, awkwardly holding cookies like two strangers at a kid's birthday party. Then she added, "You know / I haven't seen that pool dye online anywhere. You make it yourself or something." I grinned. "Trade secret." She shook her head, laughed, and walked off with her cookie. That little moment, quiet and weird and oddly wholesome, said more than any apology ever could. She wasn't trying to reclaim control or spin the story. She was just trying to exist in the same space without stepping on toes. And for once, that was enough. About 6 months after everything had settled down, I started noticing something curious happening around the neighborhood. It wasn't big or flashy, just little things, subtle changes that spoke volumes if you paid attention. The kind of changes that you don't expect after a feud as intense as the one with Karen had been. One morning, I walked out to get the mail and saw a small, hand-painted sign planted firmly in the flower bed right next to my front walkway. It was a bit crooked, made of scrap wood, and painted in bright colors. It read, "Please respect our pool, let's keep it clean and fun for everyone." Nothing signed, no names, just a message. I smiled and tilted my head, wondering who put it there. A few days later, a couple of neighbors waved me over when I was doing some yard work. They said they'd been talking and thought maybe it was time for a little community pool day. Nothing big. Just a casual invite for kids and families to enjoy the pool without drama. I liked the sound of that. It felt like healing. That afternoon, the pool was buzzing quietly, not with noise, but with energy. Kids ran around with colorful floaties, parents chatted by the deck, and there was laughter in the air that didn't feel forced or tense. The water sparkled under the sun, blue and clear, no neon surprises this time. I caught myself thinking how much the vibe had shifted from months ago when that bright green glow shocked the neighborhood. Karen showed up too, surprisingly. She didn't dive in or throw a party, but she stood near the back fence, watching the scene with something softer in her eyes. When I nodded at her, she gave a small, almost shy smile. No speeches. No rules. Just a neighbor quietly sharing space. The neighborhood had slowly started coming together, bit by bit. It wasn't about who was right or wrong anymore. It was about moving forward and letting go of grudges that could eat up any community spirit. The pool, once a battleground, had become a bridge. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lawn, I sat on the patio with a cold drink in hand. I thought back to the chain of events, the trespassing, the glowing water, the letters, the awkward conversations, and marveled at how something so small could shift the balance of an entire neighborhood's energy. Maybe it was the pool dye that started it all, but the real change came from the way people began to talk to each other again. Neighbors I barely knew stopped hiding behind closed doors. We started exchanging smiles, small favors, and eventually, invitations. No one was pretending things were perfect. There were still little annoyances, lawnmower noise, late-night dogs, and the occasional misplaced garbage bin, but those felt like normal life instead of ongoing battles. I realized the pool was more than just water and concrete. It was a symbol. A place where boundaries were tested and respected. Where community could either fracture or come together. And as I sat there watching the neighborhood settle into something healthier, I felt glad I hadn't let things slide or accepted that Karen's way was the only way. Sometimes it takes a little color, neon green, of all things, to remind us that standing up, setting limits, and demanding respect isn't just about the water you own, but the people you live beside. Months after the dust had settled, something unexpected happened that made me realize just how much the whole saga had changed things, not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. One evening, I was sitting out on the patio, watching the sun dip below the rooftops, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from someone I didn't know very well, a newer neighbor who'd moved in a few houses down just a couple of months before the pool incident. The message was simple. "Hey, I wanted to say thanks for standing up to Karen." It made me feel like maybe I could speak up too. That hit me harder than I thought it would. I hadn't really considered the ripple effect of what had happened. To me, it was just a moment of pushing back, nothing heroic or earth-shattering. But to others, it seemed to mean a lot. It meant permission to take back their own yards, their own peace, without fear of petty complaints or overbearing rules. The next day, while watering my plants, I ran into a few neighbors who had started chatting more openly since things changed. They told me stories about small acts of defiance, like putting up Halloween decorations early or parking a trailer for the weekend without worrying about getting reported. One couple even shared how they finally hosted a block party, something that hadn't happened in years because of all the tension. What really stuck out was how much the atmosphere shifted when people stopped feeling watched or judged. The neighborhood didn't become wild or chaotic, it became alive. People smiled more, greeted each other, and looked out for one another again. Even Karen seemed to adapt, in her own way. She wasn't the dictator anymore, barking orders and setting impossible standards. Instead, she was quieter, more reserved. I caught glimpses of her working in her garden, sometimes waving when she saw me, and once, I even heard her laughing quietly during a small gathering at the park. It was strange, almost surreal. But the best part. The pool, my pool, stayed a symbol of that shift. No more unexpected parties. No more rogue gatherings. Just a place where families, friends, and neighbors could come together without worry. When I look at it now, I don't just see water, I see the story it holds. The story of boundaries set and respected, of community tested and strengthened. It reminded me how sometimes, change starts with one small act, a bold splash of color in the water, a moment of standing firm, and the courage to say, "This is my space, and I will protect it." And when others see that, it gives them the courage to protect their own spaces too. Looking back, I realized that the neon green water wasn't just a prank or petty revenge. It was a turning point. A vivid, unforgettable statement that things weren't going to be business as usual. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything.